can't be good. You don't see the slides.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey, so Dr. May, what I need you to do is if you will push your computer on that touch panel there, just so we know what input.
Okay.
And then you should be able to send your presentation, and if not, I can send it from my office. But we do need you to select it.
All right, what do I need to do? Tell me again.
There should be a way to select it. I think it's either listed as PC/laptop. Okay. And then I will send it out to all the different sites. So give me just a moment, and I'll head to my office and do that for you.
All right, thank you. All right, so everyone should have been able to find the handout on ELC. So if you can't see slides yet, why don't you just pull it up from your computer and you can look at that. I think this is another fun topic. You can tell I'm a drug information geek because I think journal clubs are fun. But they're so practical, and I find journal clubs one of the best ways to actually keep up with the literature and to get better at drug literature evaluation skills. So it's something that you actually get to do and apply, so I think it's really good. I'm going to go ahead and go on, so you guys let me know if I need to slow down or stop and wait for the slides to show up. But hopefully everyone has them open on your computer. Okay, so just a couple of learning objectives today. We're going to talk a little bit about setting goals for journal clubs. So this lecture is really geared towards someone who wants to develop a journal club on their own, or if you're just thinking maybe I'll be a participant one day, maybe I just need to understand the roles and understand what the purpose is. So it really doesn't matter what your role is going to be, but I kind of included stuff if you actually wanted to develop a journal club on your own, so you have all of those steps as well. Probably in the next couple of years, your primary role is going to be the presenter and the person actually getting evaluated, but we'll talk about it from kind of all the different roles that you might see with journal clubs. So talk about target audiences and formats. Depending on what your goals are, you might pick a different format. I always, almost 100% when I do journal clubs, it's to teach drug literature evaluation skills. So I do different formats because I'm trying to teach something. If you're a practitioner in a hospital, you might be doing it to keep up with the literature. Maybe it's something very specialized for your practice area. So we'll talk about different formats and why you might choose one over the other. This lecture goes hand in hand with the one I did last week on evidence-based medicine. So you're going to see a little bit of those common themes because it's a lot of the same principles as far as those critical appraisal skills that you need to actually assess an article and decide if it's something that you want to incorporate into your practice. And then just talk a little bit about assessing journal clubs. As learners right now, you guys will probably be evaluated on journal clubs as you move forward on your APPEs. But there's also, if you are the coordinator, the person really overseeing the whole process of journal club, you probably should have some kind of programmatic evaluation. What can you do to make the journal club better or more useful for the people who are actually attending? Okay, so we'll talk about some of those things. Okay, so the majority of the presentation is going to be on key points on how to have a successful journal club. Okay, at the very end, I'll talk a little bit about some of the barriers and things that make it maybe a little less effective, but I really want to focus on the things that will make it well. So how many people have actually done a journal club, participated? Okay. Unfortunately, I can't see you guys in Athens, and Ronald's not here today, so I can't change it up. So you guys feel free to jump in, say whatever you need, stop me if you want to talk about something. But there's a lot of people in Augusta raising their hand. How many people have actually led a journal club? Okay, so a lot of people have done that as well. Okay, so these to me are the key successes. Points you need to do to have a successful journal club. First, you have to define your target audience. We're going to talk about each one of these in detail, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them here. You need to identify the roles. Some of these roles overlap. Maybe, as a preceptor, I might serve the role of the coordinator who oversees everything, but also the facilitator. But you can have different people serving in these roles. We talk about choosing a location and a format that makes for a successful journal club. how to select an article that's very impactful and meaningful to the group, how to lead the discussion, and really talk about, what we're trying to get you guys from is summarizing the information to actually analyzing the information. And I think students do a great job summarizing the information they see. I've seen that in seminar, I've seen that in journal clubs, but actually getting to the point where you're assessing. Are we doing something wrong? Kathy's here. She's going to make it all better. Is it still not coming across the other slides? Okay. Can you guys see the slides from the other sites yet, or are you okay using your computers? If you can't, it looks like everything is right on our end, and I'm not sure why they're not going across. Hearing nothing, I will move on. You need to send. Okay. Okay, so we will move on from that. We'll talk about each one of these a little bit in detail. Can you see it now? One of the distance sites?
I can still see it.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so this is another thing I think is a really key point for a successful journal club. And the GSH, who's a member of the GSHP Journal Club? I know Paul, Sydney, Ozzy from here. Okay. One thing that they did really well is they invited different faculty to come. I know Dr. Garley is kind of the GSHP liaison, so he was there, but they invited me as well, which I'm part of GSHP, but I'm not part, I'm not one of the official leaders for the group. So I think that was a really smart thing to do, to invite outside experts. When we have our resident journal club, Rusty and I go to all of them, but we don't consider ourselves the content expert. So if it's a PEDS topic, we make sure there's a PEDS pharmacist there. If it's an oncology topic, we make sure the oncology pharmacist is there. That is one of the main things I think really adds a lot of depth to a journal club, because you get that perspective and you get that insight that you wouldn't get even from us, even just as faculty or a different faculty person in a different area. I think it adds so much depth to it. So trying to invite somebody, and for you guys, it might just even be a resident who's done a rotation in oncology, and you're doing an oncology topic. So it doesn't have to be somebody who's super specialized. Just maybe somebody who has a little bit more knowledge about it than you do adds a lot to the whole group, even for us. So invite a content expert. Now, this is the hard part if it's a voluntary thing, because you can't really force people to be there. You can't force people to read the article. But that is one thing that will increase the success. Now, as me as a professor, I require y'all to come in 4,100 or 4,700. We did the good article, bad article. It was part of class, so you had to kind of do it. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, you guys are going to start the APP journal clubs, and that's going to be required. You're going to be required to do it. So as part of the class, we can require you to do it. But most of the time, journal clubs are going to be more voluntary. But if people come and they come prepared, and as just a person who's participating, that is your role, to come prepared to, that you've read the article, you've tried to use some kind of checklist to evaluate it, and you actually participate. That adds a lot. Having journal club on a regular basis helps, because people kind of get used to it. They know they're going to have a journal club once a month. And then limiting the time. We do journal club with the residents. We have 8 residents, so we do it 8 times a year. And we've always done it at someone's home, because that was kind of part of that evaluation process. We used to do it at the hospital. All the students came, all the preceptors came. It was like the residents were on a firing squad. They sat at the front, and had all these people looking at them. It was intimidating. It was really not fun. And so we tried to change it and make it better. And they said, well, if we could have it like maybe after hours, where it's not part of the day, and it's more relaxed and a little bit more started doing it at one of our houses, so we have snacks and, then we do journal club, but we had a set time. Because when you do anything after work, it's like you don't want to do one more thing related to work, right? When you've been at school all day. So, we set it where there's 30 minutes social time and 1 hour for journal club. So if you can't get there, if you're working a little late, you can show up instead of being there at 5:30, you can be there at 6. And then 6 to 7 is journal club, you can go home. So it's not going to take up your whole evening. So having a really set time really helps. People can kind of put it on their calendar and know that I'm not going to be there all night. It's not going to be that bad. That's another thing we changed. We used to have it like at 6:30 or 7, and then it got kind of late in the night, so we kind of did it right after work. We changed it so it was kind of tied. One other change we made was some people didn't want to go to people's houses. So like we live in North Augusta, but some people live in Evans, so it was a little hard. So like every other month we actually do it at the school. So people who don't really want to go far or really do the social, there's something for them too. So trying to have a little bit of something for everyone really helps with making it successful. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the audience. And why is it important to know who the audience is going to be? That's because it helps you set the goals and it helps you set what article might be good. If this is the oncology group, they're probably going to pick an oncology topic, it's going to be an oncology journal, so it is probably going to be a much higher level and how does it affect their practice versus if it's a more broad audience. So first of all, decide who is your target audience. Is it students? Are we just trying to learn a little bit more about a general topic? Or is it a specialized group who has, that they practice in that area, so it might be a little bit more in depth? Okay, so these are kind of the goals that you might choose. Again, almost always when I'm doing it, it's to teach drug literature evaluation skills. I also do it for continuing professional development, so trying to just keep up with the literature and what's going on. It's easy to listen to a journal club, and I'll tell you how I do it mostly and when we get to the formats. Practitioners basically is like to evaluate therapy, and is it something that they can incorporate into their practice? Is it going to change their practice? Is it supporting evidence of something maybe going on in the hospital? Those kind of make for the best ones. But again, like I told you, we had a little social time before we did the resident journal club. That also could be a goal where, everyone's so busy, you don't have time to see each other. Maybe coming together and using that a little bit as a social time together and then getting into the journal club could be a goal. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the roles. The coordinator, facilitator, again, that may be the same person, it may be somebody different, but I think of the coordinator as someone who's sort of overseeing the entire process. So they're probably the person who might be selecting or at least approving the article that's chosen. They probably act as a facilitator during the presentation, so kind of keep people on track and possibly evaluating if it is tied to a learning experience. They're probably the ones doing the learning and then the evaluation of more of the programmatic journal club. And the facilitator can be anyone. So like let's say you're on your APPE rotations starting in May. And then, so you may be the presenter, a resident may serve as the facilitator, and then, you have a faculty person or a practitioner there as well. But the facilitator is really the person during the journal club, sort of keeping things moving, or maybe clarifying things that are said that maybe don't make sense. They're probably the ones trying to get other people to participate in journal club. And when we talk about the formats, you can have it different ways. I think that discussion is much better, whether it's at the end of a presentation or actually during the presentation, but having some kind of discussion. But people can be very long-winded and get very off track, so like trying to herd cats sometimes, kind of keeping them back and making sure that everything is being wrapped up in a timely manner. Okay, so this is the role you're probably going to find yourself in the most over the next year or two, either a presenter or just a participant. Make sure you're clarifying, if this part of your APPE rotation or whatever, make sure you clarify, can you pick the article or do they have a list of articles that they want you to pick from? But there usually is some kind of approval process, not only on the article, but actually how you're presenting, whether it be a presentation or if it's more where you're just going through the article and looking at the internal validity. So make sure you ask, but if you do it with top to bottom doing the internal validity, but if you try to do that at University Hospital or, somewhere else, they're gonna look at you like crazy, like, what are you doing? And you should be able to, not all journal clubs should take an hour to do. You should be able to do the essence of a journal club in 5 minutes on rounds. That's basically what you're doing when you're trying to support a clinical recommendation, is that you have an article, you're trying to let your team know what it's about. So being able to pull out those important parts, it really shouldn't be something that takes you an hour to do. Okay, so the presenter is usually the person that will let everyone know about, when the journal club's going to be, send out the article. Be a little careful about forwarding the actual article, because you probably are breaking copyright laws by sending an actual article out. It's probably better just to send a citation. Most people have access to it as long as you send a citation. So I would just send a citation versus the actual article. I think that's kind of splitting hairs a little bit, but technically that there could be some copyright violations for that, especially if you're sending it outside of your institution that maybe pays for that subscription and you're sending it somewhere outside. Some preceptors may ask you to write up a synopsis or summary of the article, and I think the GSHP group does that, and it's a really nice summary. It has all the information in there, very easy to follow. So that is something that a lot of people would like you to do. If you want a good format, you can ask one of the people from the GSHP group. Here comes the boss. Is he coming in? Oh, I thought Rusty was coming in. Thinking there was another problem. Okay, so I personally, when I'm on APPEs, I don't get the students to write out a summary, because sometimes what happens with the summary is that people just look at the summary and they don't actually delve into the article. So I usually just have the article and we just go from top to bottom and do that. So, but either way there's no problem. Just whoever you're doing it for, just find out what the expectation is. And the presenter is a person who leads the discussion, invites a content expert, and I would always take the opportunity to incorporate some kind of learning pearl related to the drug literature evaluation, because that's part to me of every journal club, is learning a little bit. It's like, oh, what is that statistical test and why do we use that? You'll be surprised how much those things just come up over and over again, and then when you see a certain test, you know exactly why they're using it. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the content expert, the drug literature evaluation, or statistics expert. While I do not by any stretch consider myself a statistician, that's probably the role I wind up playing most of the time when I do a journal club. Okay, and if you're just participating, you don't have a formal role, you're just coming to the journal club, you actually do have a formal role, because it's really important that people who are participating have read the article and they have evaluated it and they can actually contribute to the discussion. So make sure to read the article in advance. That's why it's so important to probably send it out about a week in advance so you can have plenty of time to read it. Okay, so the next thing is choosing a location. It can be anywhere. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything formal. I do a lot in the classroom, whether it's in the drug information office when I have students on APPE. We've done it 4,700 in the big classroom. We're going to be doing it in APP in smaller groups. So that's one location. You guys are probably going to do it mostly on your APPE rotation, so probably in a conference room with maybe 3 or 4 other students, or maybe a resident and a preceptor. That's probably how you're going to do this mostly. We've done it, like I said, with our resident journal club at people's homes, where it's a little bit more casual, so we can incorporate some quality time together. But probably one of my favorite ways to do it is by webinar. And how many people are members of the ACCP, the student group for ACCP? The PRNs, have y'all heard of the PRNs? Those are the practice and research networks. So basically people who practice in a certain area, are part of a certain PRN. So of course I'm a member of the Drug Information PRN for ACCP, but they have cardiology, pediatrics, whatever. Almost all of the PRNs now do a webinar, like a virtual journal club style webinar. And webinars are great because you can sit in your office, be at home in your pajamas, so it's probably a little more convenient, and especially if they make them enduring. So you don't necessarily have to do the live one, that they put them on their website, and then you can go at any time and look at it. And they always tend to be articles that are kind of hot topics. So like if you're really interested in cardiology, if you were to sit in on a cardiology PRN journal club, there would always be those articles that everyone's talking about. And you have experts who are actually leading the discussion and talking about them. So that's one thing that, don't forget that there's things like that out there that you can actually participate in. And for the drug information PRN, what's really nice is that they love for residents to actually present. So every year for probably the last 3 years, one of our PGY1 residents, or PGY2, I've had both, have actually been the presenter. So, there's notifications that go out to all the members of when it's going to happen, and all the ones that we do are actually enduring, so they're on the ACCP website, so I can go back at any time and look at any of them that I want to look at. And there's a bunch of different formats that you can actually build an electronic or a virtual journal club from. WebEx, GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar. The ones that we use for the drug information PRN are Adobe Connect. So there's a lot of different ones. I think the college actually has Adobe Connect, so if you're interested in trying to develop something like that, that might be a possibility. And then this is just what that format looks like. You usually see the participants over here on the right. Everyone can see the screen. So it's basically you're looking at it on your laptop or on your desktop computer. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the formats that you can have. There is no right or wrong. Again, it depends on what your goal is and what you're trying to get out of the journal club. Probably the ones I use the most is the critical appraisal of a single article. I think just doing one article is really good. I think when you try to start doing 2 or more, it gets a little much, for one journal club. The time gets really long, and I don't think people's attention span lasts more than about an hour. So looking at one, for me, I like looking at the internal validity. So assessing the methods and looking at the results and analyzing the results, trying to teach those skills. When I'm on APPE, probably what I do the most is I do the strengths and weaknesses of a particular study design. So I'll let the students pick whatever they want. Whatever they're interested in, maybe it's related to an article or a topic that they might be on their next rotation. Drug information, I always think it's a building block for all your other rotations. So if you're doing cardiology next, you might want to pick a cardiology article, but what I limit you by is you have to pick a certain study design. So we do journal club every week on my rotation. So one week we might do a meta-analysis, we might do a non-inferiority, we might do a randomized control trial. But the whole point is to see how you should look at each one of those differently, why you might use those. So, or an observational study. So really trying to look more at the study design and assess the study design. Historical perspective is where maybe you pick a classic article that changed the guidelines. Like you have a guideline recommendation, you want to look at the actual articles that were used to make that recommendation. I've already said that discussion is probably my favorite style, and again, I usually start the discussion from the very beginning. I think doing a presentation works well if it's online, like the webinars, almost all of those are done that way. To be honest, if you ever are part of a medical journal club, presentation style is probably what you'll see there as well. And I think all of those are great, as long as the discussion part comes in at some point, whether it be after the presentation or what. And even if you don't do a full presentation, it is really good to give some background information and kind of set the stage, like what is the current standard of care, what do the guidelines currently say, so to kind of bring everybody up to speed so when you start the article, everyone kind of has some baseline. What you guys are going to be doing for APP is a debate style. So you're going to have a pro and a con, and you're going to be broken into groups, and you are going to have to kind of make a case for why you feel like you should do the therapy or not do the therapy. So it'll be a little bit more of a debate, and I think those are really fun. But to do a debate effectively, you have to read both articles, because what you're trying to do is identify all the flaws for the viewpoint that you do not have, and then make all the positive effects for the viewpoint that you do have. So a little bit of that is just being how convincing you can be. So just your presentation style. All right, we already talked about webinars. One more thing though, y'all are past the point to be able to actually do this, but ACCP also has a clinical research challenge. But what's really cool is that the stage 1 journal club, where you have to read an article and you have to answer questions about it. And that's actually how we're doing the APP journal club that y'all are going to be doing in a couple of weeks. The pre's assignment is basically where you read the article and you answer some questions about the article, but it's in the format of what ACCD does for the clinical challenge. Actually, yesterday was the deadline for the teams. So over the course, this is something that goes over the course of about 6 months. So round one, and then there's a second round of journal club. So if you get past that first round, there's a second one, and then you go on. The final thing is more of a research project, but you got to get past all the first steps to get to that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about choosing the article. We've already talked a lot about this last week when we talked about evidence-based medicine, about kind of how do you choose a good article. Again, think about the level of the people who are attending, and that really will help you decide if you want something more specific or something a little bit more general. Ideas, where you can get ideas is like things that are coming up on rounds once you get to your APPE rotations, like things that may be controversial, things that people are talking about, or just current practice, if you just want to pick something related to that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about PICO, the PICO method. I think choosing an article for journal club is very similar to what we talked about with evidence-based medicine, about try to answer a clinical question. Because you've got to be kind of focused to pick a good article. Otherwise, you pick something and then you realize that there were only 12 patients, or maybe it wasn't something that's going to change our practice. Think about the relevance of the information that you're looking at. So if you're trying to decide which article to pick, kind of go back to, is it relevant? Is it a point or no? Remember, point is patient-oriented evidence that matters. So does it decrease mortality? Does it decrease stroke? Does it answer a specific question that maybe has come up in your practice? Or does it provide you knowledge that may change the way you practice? Kind of yes, that's probably worth your time to read, okay? And this is the same slide that we talked about last week, just kind of balancing, is it relevant and practical versus the time that you have, because you guys already know your time is precious and you don't want to waste your time doing something that's not going to be impactful. So the way I look at the abstracts. I look at, is it the patient population I'm talking about? What kind of outcomes are they looking at? Is it an outcome that I really care about? And if yes, I say, okay, well maybe I'll read the study. And that's where the internal validity comes in, is actually assessing it and evaluating it for the merit of the trial. Okay, so I'm going to let you guys choose which one you want to read here. Okay, so there are 2 studies on empagliflozin. This one was from New England Journal of Medicine, so we got a really good article. If you can't read this, the primary outcomes, so this is what I would look at. It's like, okay, this is New England Journal of Medicine. That's a really reputable journal. Had 7,000 patients. Okay, that's a lot of people in there. I might look at what type of patients to make sure they're the type of patients I'm taking care of. All right, the primary composite outcome was death from cardiovascular cause, non-fatal MI, or non-fatal stroke. Okay, so that's what they were looking at. All right, let's look at the second study. This was also an empagliflozin. It was in one of the specialty journals for Lancet, so also a reputable journal. And it was looking at empagliflozin. The primary endpoint was change from baseline at A1C at week 24, looking at basically the different treatment groups. Okay, so which one do you think would probably be the most impactful to read? Aaron.
First one.
The first one. Why would you pick the first one?
Deals with mortality.
Okay. Okay. So this one was looking at mortality. So it was probably an outcome that was a little bit more impactful. So when you look at these 2 on the surface, it may say, well, they look really similar. Which one am I going to pick? This one was looking at placebo. But a lot of, I didn't read the whole thing, but reading the whole thing is probably like standard of care treatment. This one says monotherapy with sitagliptin have that other drug just to make sure that, you know, it got the same results, that it's sort of like quality control versus it's actually comparing it against the other. But an active control is always better than just a placebo. And like stage 3, you know, when we think about phase 3, phase 4 studies, that's where you start getting into more of the comparators. Okay. Okay. So this slide is really important because sometimes I think this part gets missed when students actually present a journal club. They start right in with the article. It's so important, and I think it's so helpful for me when I'm listening to a journal club for somebody to kind of bring me up to speed. And so really looking at giving me a little bit of an overview of the study, standard of practice, a little bit of background information, maybe what the previous studies have shown, what is really the controversy or the issues, and why was this study really even important to be done, kind of bringing us all up to speed on that. That is really key. It doesn't matter what kind of design, you know, format you're using, whether it be the debate style or presentation style or discussion style. It's really important to bring everyone up to speed at the beginning. So a little bit of an overview of what the study looked at and what the guidelines say, what the current standard of therapy is, and what the previous studies have shown is really, really key. And using the checklist at the beginning, because you know right now you're still developing those skills, so that's why a checklist is so important. It really helps you look at the things that you should be looking for in analyzing the study versus just summarizing the study. And then regardless of whether you're presenting or you're doing a discussion, it needs to be a structured format. So like if you're going to do a presentation, then open it up for discussion and have that part be a little bit structured so that if it's like no one's in charge, it's sort of like no one knows what to say or whatever. So just making sure that there's some kind of guided discussion is really helpful. Okay. As far as the external validity, you know, really making sure it's applicable to your patients. The condition is in the scope that you're looking for, you know, the type of patients, and that it is an outcome that that's really going to be impactful. That kind of all goes to that generalizability, and is this something you're going to be able to use, and it actually will help answer a specific question. For the checklist, you know, again, this is from the evidence-based medicine lecture. This is basically kind of the checklist I gave you on 4700, really geared towards a randomized control trial. So just kind of goes through the components of the checklist. But remember, there are some standardized checklists for different types of study, and you really should use a checklist that's specific for the type of study. So Consort, we're going to talk about pharmacist letter, but if you don't have a subscription to that, Consort and Prisma are free. And Consort is what we're recommending that you use for the trials that we're going to do for ATP. This is just kind of what that looks like. And then remember, Prisma is preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. So that it would be more specific for a meta-analysis. When you look at the Prisma checklist, it's really, really long. There is a more condensed version that was published in JAMA that Rusty loves. When he did a talk for ACCP for meta-analysis, he actually recommended this. So I think this might be, if you're looking for something maybe a little more concise for meta-analysis, that was probably a good one. And then at the end of your journal club, make sure that you talk about where it fits into clinical practice. Every journal club should end with, what do we do with this information? How does it fit into our current practice? Okay, and the last thing I want to talk a little bit about is just the evaluations. There can be a lot of different types of evaluations for journal clubs. Obviously, if you're a learner, you're probably doing a preceptor evaluation. There's self-evaluations. You guys are going to be doing peer evaluations with the APP Journal Club, and then an evaluation again of the whole process. And there are several rubrics that are available if you're interested in just like, you know, what kind of things should be evaluated in the journal club. So there's one that's published in the American Journal of Pharmaceutical Education. Put that there for your reference. But these are generally the components. It's usually like on a Likert scale. Or 1 to 5, or comment, maybe comments. We even have one for people who don't really want to spend a lot of time to evaluate evaluate and say, what's one thing they did really well, what's one thing they need to work on, so that, you know, it could be anything from a Likert scale with all of these components to just, what did they do well, what do you need to work on? Okay, and then the barriers for Journal Club, the main thing I think is just not having a process, not having kind of a structure and flow, somebody kind of overseeing that, not having enough time to prepare. So, you know, if you send the journal article out the day of or day before, people might not have time to really read. So try to give, we always say about a week in advance for people to really prepare, and then send in a reminder like the day before. If you don't have a content expert, it's probably not going to be quite as rich of a discussion. And again, it doesn't have to be a faculty person or a practitioner. It could be just somebody who's maybe, if you're a first year student, it could be a second year student, or if you're a third year student, it could be a fourth year student. Just somebody who has a little bit more experience than you. And, you know, picking an article that doesn't have any relevance to your practice, that might be interesting, but it may not change the way you do things or really be impactful. And, you know, again, if you don't have a feedback mechanism to make it better each time, then it kind of gets stagnant. So always thinking about trying to change it and make it better. Okay, so that's all the content I had. I do have one example I want you to try on your own. We have just a few minutes. We'll try to look at that. So this kind of goes to analyzing the data, you know, versus just reporting it. We're going to use a non-inferiority trial just because sometimes it can be confusing, and especially when you say this study, you know, it did not meet non-inferiority. It's like it's a double negative. Sometimes it's really confusing about how to look at it. So this is just a little example. I'm going to give you a little bit of background before we start, and then I'm going to let you all look at this and see if y'all can come up with how you would interpret the results that you're looking at, okay? All right, so non-inferiority. That means that the standard treatment is not better than the new treatment by a specified margin. So anytime you're talking about a non-inferiority trial, you should always report the non-inferiority margin. It's not always the same. Now for anti-infectives, they do have like a standard 10. There's guidance from the FDA that came out about that. The one that we're talking about is not 10. I don't think it's a 10, I can't remember. But if you think about it, it's always going to be, it's never going to be probably more than 20% difference, okay? Because the whole point is that it's not that much worse than what we currently use. And the reason we do non-inferiority studies is that probably it's not feasible to do just a randomized controlled trial because you need so many people to see a difference because the difference is so small that you need so many people. So that's why you see these done a lot. So it's probably going to be somewhere between 10, 15, maybe 20%. So you always see non-inferiority studies when the difference is not expected to be that big, okay? All right, so let's look at how you would actually interpret it. So you usually will see a graph that looks like this, and you know the 0 here means that this is an experimental trial, so 0 means zero difference. So if the confidence interval, and you can kind of think of these lines as confidence intervals, crosses over 0, then it's not going to be statistically significant, right? Okay, but that's not as much what we're talking about. We're talking more about this non-inferiority margin. You usually see that as a dotted line. And so it's set. So basically what we're saying, as long as, and it could be on either side, you know, depending on how you're reporting it, as long as it doesn't cross over that non-inferiority margin, we're going to say that it's non-inferior. It's not worse than the treatment, okay? So if this is our non-inferiority margin, anything that's to the left of that is just out. That did not meet non-inferiority, right? So that's just out. So these two did not meet non-inferiority. And in fact, that this one's not only is it to the left of 0, it's also to the left of the non-inferiority margin. So not only is it did not meet non-inferiority, it was actually inferior to anything. So anything that is on the right of the in this case, is going to be considered it met non-inferiority. So you got this one, and this one, and this one at the top. All of those would be considered non-inferior. Now, sometimes they'll go to the next step and say, if it met non-inferiority, then we can go on and say, is it superior? Okay, well, the only way it can be superior is if it doesn't cross over 0. So this top one would be the only one that would even be eligible to look for superiority. So, but anything that's to the left of this is going to be considered non-inferior, okay? All right, so let's look at this study. Kendall.
How could that one that's the second from the bottom be both non-inferior and inferior?
Okay, it's not, it meant non-inferiority because it's to the left of the non-inferiority margin. So we're saying, you know, it's not worse than the treatment. That's how you would say that. But the fact that it's on this side of 0 is to the left of 0, there's no way it could be superior because it's on the negative side
So it's about
of
the
that.
same.
Yeah, so the only way it could be superior would be if it crossed over 0, it's really indeterminate, because you can't really say, because it crosses both. I mean, it meant non-inferiority, but it actually crossed over to 0, so you couldn't say that it was, you can't say anything else about that. You can only say, okay? All right, so let's look at this study. This mirabegron compared to sulfenacin for overactive bladder. Okay, these are people who have failed, were not happy with their current treatment. It was a randomized trial. So they looked at different doses, and these were appropriate doses for the drug, overactive bladder. And look at your patient population. Are these the people you're taking care of? They had over 18 with overactive symptoms for greater than 3 months. And if you look at table 1, which is always like that table with all the demographics, maybe a third of the patients were elderly. So if you're working in a nursing home, is that enough for you to change your practice based on this? Yeah, that's looking at, does this meet the population that you're taking care of? 76% were female. It was a double-blind randomized non-inferiority trial. They were looking at change from baseline to end of treatment and mean number of micturations per 24 hours. Do you think that's a point or a no? Think about, is this important to patients? Is it important to the caregivers? Would you think that's a patient-oriented outcome that matters? I would say yes. I mean, if they're not going to, you know, it's actually helping their overactive bladder quality of life, think about for the patient at least, that probably would be good. All right, and the non-inferiority would be confirmed if the lower boundary of the two-sided confidence interval between the two groups was greater than -0.2. Okay, so they do a really good job in this study. That chart I just showed you a minute ago, they actually did the same chart specific for this. Okay, so they said basically this is a non-inferiority margin. So as long as it's to the right of that, it's going to be considered non-inferior. That's kind of basically how you look at that. And this means that, you know, if it crosses over 0, it's not going to be statistically significant. So the only one that would have any chance to be superior with the mirabegron would be this one over here on the far side. This one obviously would be worse. The sulfenacin would be better because it's across both lines. All right, so look at this one, and y'all tell me what you think. All right, so here's 0, and here's the -0.2. This was the actual results they found. So -0.18 is kind of the point estimate, but the confidence interval goes to -0.42 all the way up to plus 0.6. So did it meet non-inferiority? Abby?
No,
Why not?
because it crossed over the margin to the left.
Okay,
And
so it crossed over the non-inferiority margin, so this did not meet non-inferiority.
Right.
Okay. Could you, okay, so we can't even look for superiority, right? Because you've got to meet non-inferiority before you meet superiority, right? Or before you can even look for superiority. But even if it were over here, you still couldn't look for superiority because it crosses over 0. So it's going to be not statistically significant. So it was not demonstrated. So non-inferiority was not demonstrated in this case just because it crossed over. Because remember, the upper boundary had to be, you know, greater than -0.2. Okay, Rio?
So is this technically inconclusive?
This would be, yes, this is, well, it's not, you know, it is conclusive that this did not meet non-inferiority. because it crossed over, the upper boundary crossed over the non-inferiority margin. Okay, so that's really what you're kind of getting. You're trying to analyze the information versus just saying those just report the information. Like, what does that really mean? How am I going to interpret that? Katie?
Do they ever report p-values with the non-inferiority too and confidence?
Yeah, you can see p-values reported, but if it crosses over 0, you don't need a p-value. You know it's not going to be statistically significant. Because just because you have a point estimate, if it contains a value of 0, statistically, any value in that confidence interval could be the actual difference. So if 0 is included in that, you don't even need the p-value. It's not going to be statistically significant. You can look at the confidence interval and tell that. Now, if you're talking about observational studies, remember it's 1. 1 means no association, so you kind of interpret that the same way. If the confidence interval contains 1, it would be no association between those two. Aaron?
You couldn't call it inferior though, right? Because the right side didn't cross
Yeah.
over the non-inferiority margin.
You couldn't call this inferior because it does cross over 0 where the mirabegron would actually be better. So it's really inconclusive because it crosses over both. And when you have a confidence interval that wide, you probably have a lot of heterogeneity in your sample. It's just all over the board. So in those cases, it's really hard to say anything about it. But you can say it did not meet non-inferiority. So, all right, I'm not going to test you on that. That's just an example for fun, just to kind of show you about analyzing the data. So don't worry about trying to understand that for a test or anything. I'm not going to ask you to do that, okay? All right, any questions? I know we're about out of time. Anything? All right. All right, well, thank y'all for being here. Hope y'all have a good rest of the week.